Hello there, I'm Juliana Michaels and welcome to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be sharing something just a little different for me. It's not a card, it's a junk journal and Halloween themed. It's not necessarily your traditional definition of a junk journal in that there's not a lot of room to journal. So maybe a mini album would be more appropriate, but I always find this method of creating a great way for me to use some of the products that I tend to collect and not use and just kind of look at them. And that would be the Tim Holtz Idea-ology collection. I have quite a collection of it, but I'm not the best at using it. So during the holidays especially, I try to take some time and do something like this to kind of help use up a little bit of that stash that I have. Along with the Tim Holtz Idea-ology products, I'm also using some of the new Sizzix dies and embossing folders that have been designed by Eileen Hull. And I will kind of point out some of those products as I go through the mini album here with you. As always, I encourage you to use supplies that you already own. However, if you're interested in any of the products I'm using, you can find the supply list with links in the description box below. Just click on More to see more. When you shop through those links, you're supporting me at no extra cost to you, and I really appreciate that so very much. If you would like a more in-depth look at each page of this mini album, make sure to visit my blog where you can view photos of each page. There is a link to it located in the description box below. This is not going to be a process video. This is just going to be kind of a flip through of the album so I can show you how it came together, and I'll kind of talk through some of the ways I created some of the pieces that I used to decorate the pages throughout this. So let's get started. So to begin with, I'm using the Eileen Hull Biggs mini album die this just came out, and I used that as the base for the album. So it creates this kind of 5x5 size mini album, and it's about 1.25 inches in thickness. So it's not going to hold a lot of pages depending on what you put in there, but for me it was perfect size to create this little mini book. I took the Biggs die and some of the Sizzix mat board, and I adhered some black cardstock to the mat board using some double-sided adhesive tape, and then I ran that through my die cutting machine to cut out the base cover, or to cut out the cover of the album. And then from there I took this beautiful new embossing folder called Floral Damask, and I embossed some Tim Holtz black craft stock with that embossing folder, and then I sanded over it with a little bit of fine grit sandpaper using the Ranger sanding disc. I just cut the paper down to size to fit the front cover, the back cover, and then the spine of the album. And I used a corner punch to create a smaller corner there so that it kind of fit with that rounded edge that's on the die. And then for the cover here, I used a combination of some Halloween Idea-ology. Mostly I've got some pattern paper there in the back, some of the transparency with that window, with the cracked windows that he has, the little lock here, some brads, and then these are some of the chipboard pieces. So the window, these little wood slats, and this sentiment type piece. The paper doll there behind is one of the kind of larger paper dolls that's included in the packaging this year. And I kind of like that there's an assortment of sizes in there with the large ones and the that are just like kind of the portraits, I think he calls them. And then the full size paper dolls. So this is another die set that's called Floral, Pockets, and Paperclips, and then this is Floral, Bookmarks, Pockets, and Toppers. And I've used both of these dies as well throughout this album, and that is what I used here on this little piece that's kind of tucked behind. I took this shape here and cut it from some mixed media heavy stock that I had ink smushed into some old paper distress ink, and then I inked the edges with a little bit of ground espresso distress ink, cut it in half, and then kind of tucked it behind there. And then these pieces on the cover here are just all layered and adhered together using adhesive, and to create that kind of dimensional cover piece there. So on the inside here, I created two signatures. As you can see, there's sections here, and I made them thick enough that they could handle some dimensional elements as I created layers and that on the inside here as I decorated the pages. And to do that, I took some Tim Holtz Distressed Mixed Media Heavy Stock. That's the kind of off-white cream colored cardstock, and I ink smushed that into some old paper distress ink, and then I cut it down to create these two signatures. And each one of these is 5 inches by 9 3/4 inches, and then I scored it at 4 3/4, and then again at 5 inches to create and give that spacing there so that it could tolerate the dimension that I was going to add in here. So here on the first page and throughout the whole album here, I've used a lot of Tim Holtz Idea-ology Halloween papers to decorate each page. So the mixed media paper is kind of like the base, and then I inked the edges of that with some ground espresso distress ink. And then for the with the papers, I just tore them or cut them down to size and layered. Some of these are scraps even that I had left over from past Halloween papers, and just layered them to kind of create and use up some of those papers that I've had. So for this little embellishment, I used the Bookmark die set. I cut it down in height so it wasn't quite as tall, and so that it would fit into my album. And then I used this little label piece here on the front as well, just to further embellish it. And then I added some little ephemera pieces, some stamped images here, some little brads, and then I also added some of the cello sticker tape. Here on the edges, I added a little bit of machine stitching onto this strip before I adhered it to the background. And then I just put a little bit of adhesive here on these edges so that I could tuck this in that little band that I created. Moving on to the next pages here. Again, just kind of a combination of ephemera pieces and die cuts and paper dolls. Added in some of the little stickers. Got a little bit of mummy cloth here. This is using one of the pockets that is with the Bookmark die set. And then this little tag piece I'd made is a die cut from one of Tim Holtz's sets. And I had just kind of had this in my stash where I'd just done some stamping and inking around the edges, and I pulled it out and realized it fit perfectly into that little pocket, so it found a home there. And I also have some more of that cello tape. On this side here, I've got the floral pocket, so that is kind of behind this paper doll here. And in the pocket then I created a little card using the die and the flower dies that come with this set, and then I added some ephemera here and then a little bit of stamping on this tab die, and then just stuck that here into the pocket and created some paper flowers here. These are just using, again, some of the Idea-ology papers, and got some stickers. And then I kind of popped this up here with some foam tape behind this paper doll so that it would hold up the paper dolls and give me enough room to be able to slide that pocket card in there. This here is just a little bit of mummy cloth that I custom dyed using a combination of black soot and ground espresso spray stains. And then to hold each of the signatures in, I used some mummy cloth as well. I just took a length of it, dyed it with the black soot and ground espresso spray stains, and then wrapped that around the signature here and then around the spine of the mini album, and then just tied it together here at the top. So now we're going to go to the back side of that first signature, and again, just kind of a repetition of things with, you know, more of the pattern paper, ephemera layering. This is that same label die cut that I used on the front cover here, and I found this Tim Holtz stamp that fit perfectly in that little section of the die, and so I cut it. I cut this little piece off here and tucked it under there, and then I put the other piece up here and tucked it in there. Again, another strip of pattern paper with some stitching that I did before I put it into the album, so I'm not stitching through all that thickness, just that one little layer of paper there. And this, I just didn't adhere everything down behind this as I was putting it down, so I glued all these layers onto that black strip, and then I left, and then when I went to put the black strip on, I just adhered these side pieces, so that gave me the ability to tuck something in behind here. And this is just a little ephemera piece. I added some pattern paper to the back side of it to give it a little bit more sturdiness, and added some mummy cloth and a little charm here just to add a little further embellishment. So now we're going to move on to the second signature. And on this page, I used the Eileen Hull Library Pocket ATC card and tabs die. And I do believe this has been retired, but you might still be able to find it out there if you look for it. But any kind of a pocket die would work. And I just die cut some of that distressed mixed media cardstock, did that ink smushing with the old paper, and inked the edges with some of the ground espresso, and then added some stamping, and then layered on some stickers and ephemera and some of that sellotape. And then this is just a little tab that I stamped on and stapled on the corner there. And on the back side again, just kind of layered some little pieces I had in my ephemera stash, and then this bug stamp that I had in my stash as well, but this is one of the Tim Holtz stamp sets that has a coordinating die set that's called Entomology. I used that same stamp and die set here with this moth. And then from there, I just layered other pieces of ephemera and added this little piece and tucked that into the pocket as well. Another little stamped piece that I had in my stash, and then added some stickers and added these little bat wings to the paper doll. And then again, kind of carried that theme of that black paper here with the strip behind and the stitching. So now onto the inside of the second signature. And on this page, there's no interactive elements. I definitely could have added one if I wanted to tuck something behind her here. I just didn't end up doing that. I felt like it was already starting to get pretty thick, and I knew I wanted to do this page with this envelope here. So I just chose to layer some various ephemera pieces here, and then a little sticker and some of the cello tape. Again, if you look here throughout, when I was working on pages that I knew were going to be, open and facing each other, I tried to use the same paper just to give some cohesiveness. So you can see here the striped paper here, and then the same thing, this background paper, and then of course this black paper. And I did that on all of these pages. So just to give it a cohesiveness as you looked at each page. And the same thing here, I've got this striped paper and then this background paper. And then because I used some red on this page, I wanted to add a little bit of red over here just to kind of carry that color throughout. When it comes to trying to position these things, I usually start off with like whatever I want the main focus to be. So I start kind of with the paper doll, and then I just kind of go through the ephemera packs and die cuts that I have, and just kind of start layering pieces to create the little collage here. So like this one here, I knew these little boys I wanted them to kind of sit on something, so I wanted this, so I selected a piece that was horizontal there to position behind them. With this pocket here, I knew having a little paper doll that was shorter than the pocket would be nice, and one that was standing would be nice as well. But you could also probably have done a sitting one here with this, especially with this little piece underneath here. The paper doll could kind of have sat on that little ephemera piece. So now back to this inside here. So then on this side, I created this little pocket, and this is using the Eileen Hull journaling card, envelope, and window die set. Again, this I believe is, this one I do believe is still available, but it might be retiring soon as well. So, but any kind of little envelope die would work. You just need one that's the size that would fit into whatever mini album you were going to create. And then here I just used the die that comes with this set to create this little card, and I just die cut it from some of the mixed media craft stock and did some stamping on the back side of it, added a little sellotape, and then on the front of it here I added some strips of pattern paper that were just kind of scraps that I had, and I inked the edges of those, and then I just layered on some ephemera pieces, stickers, and the little paper dolls to finish that off. And then I took a piece of the mummy cloth and I cut it in half so it wouldn't be quite so thick and bulky, and dyed it like I did with these other mummy cloth pieces that you've seen throughout, and then tied that around the envelope and added this little charm here. And then again, you can see where I used the mummy cloth to adhere this signature and wrapped it around and tied it into the album like I did the first one. And then this is the final page, and again just more of the same, kind of using some of those pattern papers and repeating some papers that I had used previously. So like this stripe here is this stripe here, so then I added the paper doll and some ephemera pieces and the sellotape. And then this oval shape here is a die that comes with the journaling card die set, so this envelope journaling die here, that oval shape comes with that. And I just did some stamping on that and then added that to the layers. As you might have noticed throughout the whole album, all of the pages on the papers a lot of them are torn, so I just used my hands to tear the paper, and then I would ink the edges with some ground espresso distress ink. And then if it needed a little bit more distressing, I would take the back side of my craft knife and just rub that along the edges of the paper. You can also use a little distressing tool, or you could just leave it plain. You don't have to add all this distressing and darkness to things if you don't prefer that. Like if you wanted to keep it a little more simple and clean, you could, you don't have to add all that inking and distressing. On some of the pieces here, you might notice that they're a little bit distressed. And to do that, I would just take the Ranger sanding disc and just lightly kind of scratch that over the surface. I'd use my backside of my craft knife to distress the edges of it, and then add some ink over it to just grunge it up a little bit more. Hopefully you've enjoyed kind of seeing this little flip through the album. I will say the process of creating this took me, I think I worked on this for about 3 days and for rather large chunks of time each time. So I'd say I probably spent I've maybe spent 12 hours on this mini album, putting it together. It takes, for me anyway, it takes a long time to figure out where I want to position everything. So I do a lot of playing around with the layering. I usually start off with picking out what pattern papers I want to put down, and then the focal point, like I mentioned earlier. So like I kind of pick what paper doll I might want to use, or for like this one, I knew I wanted to use this little pocket die. So I picked, I cut that out first and then kind of laid that down, and then I went through and found some paper dolls that I thought might work well with that. And that's kind of what I did all throughout here. So if you think about like what you might want to be the main focus of it, so on this one here, I had these two paper dolls picked out, and then I realized this little pocket would fit nicely there, and then this little piece fit in, and then I went from there with layering these other ephemera pieces and stickers. So kind of use that same formula all throughout as I created each page, and just kind of went one page at a time while thinking about how things would look once they were all together. So I had cut the signatures out and then kind of started laying out like I want these papers and this die cut on this page. And sometimes if you're not really sure, like I also did some die cutting out of just some computer paper with some of these dies so that I could lay them down and kind of get a feel for like how I wanted to position things on the page. And so it was just kind of like using a little template without cutting into my good paper. And then once I knew I was going to use it here, and I had picked out my background papers, then I could go through and pick out what pattern paper to cut out using that die. So hopefully some of those thoughts and processes of how my brain was working as it created this will be helpful for you if you're looking to create something similar. And I appreciate you stopping by today, and until next time, stay crafty, my friend.